Imagine discovering your HOA president gifted your private ranch lake to her son, then called the cops when you fought back, but she had no idea you secretly control the HOA's entire budget. This is the wild tale of petty power plays, sneaky schemes, and a jaw-dropping showdown that'll leave you stunned. If you love unhinged HOA drama, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and ring the bell for more crazy neighbor sagas every week. Let's dive into this insane story of a Karen who thought she could outsmart everyone, until she met her match.
We need to take
The
a stand
sun hung low
against
over
this.
Willow Creek Ranch, casting a golden shimmer across the serene lake that was the crown jewel of the sprawling property. This wasn't just any lake, it was a private, man-made oasis meticulously maintained by its owner, Ethan Caldwell, a shrewd businessman who'd built his fortune in real estate and retired to this idyllic retreat. Ethan's ranch was a haven of rolling hills, grazing horses, and that pristine lake, which he'd spent years perfecting with native fish stocks and a custom filtration system. The lake wasn't just a feature. It was his pride, his legacy, and the heart of his 200-acre estate. But trouble was brewing in the form of Margaret Hensley, the HOA president of the adjacent Willow Creek Estates, a gated community of manicured lawns and cookie-cutter mansions. Margaret was the kind of woman who thrived on control, her sharp eyes always scanning for rule breakers, her clipboard perpetually in hand. She was the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, and her reign was about to collide with Ethan's world in a way no one saw coming. Willow Creek Estates shared a border with Ethan's ranch, a line marked by a low wooden fence and a history of uneasy coexistence. The HOA had long envied Ethan's lake, visible from their community park, its sparkling waters a constant reminder of what their cookie-cutter suburb lacked. Margaret, in particular, had made it her mission to assert dominance over anything within her line of sight, and Ethan's lake was no exception. She'd sent letters over the years, citing vague HOA bylaws, claiming the lake's runoff affected their drainage system or that its fish might disrupt the ecosystem. Ethan, a man of few words but sharp instincts, had always dismissed her complaints with a polite but firm response, knowing his property was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. What Margaret didn't know was that Ethan wasn't just a wealthy recluse, he was the silent financial backbone of the HOA itself. Years ago, when the community faced bankruptcy, Ethan had quietly funneled funds through a shell company to keep it afloat, securing a hidden clause in the HOA's charter that gave him veto power over its budget. It was his insurance policy, a way to protect his ranch from overreaching neighbors. He'd never used it, but it was there, a ticking time bomb Margaret was about to trigger. The trouble began on a crisp autumn morning when Ethan noticed a new sign by his lake's edge, planted squarely on his property. Willow Creek Estates Fishing Club, private access. His blood ran cold. The sign was garish, with bold red letters and the HOA's logo, claiming his lake as if it were community property. Worse, he spotted a teenage boy, Margaret's son Tyler, casting a fishing line into the water, a smug grin on his face. Ethan's first instinct was to storm over, but he held back, sensing this was no accident. Margaret had been probing for years, and this was her boldest move yet. He drove to the HOA office, a small building adorned with Margaret's self-aggrandizing plaques, and found her behind her desk, her hair perfectly coiffed, her smile dripping with false sincerity. She claimed the lake was a shared resource, and that her son's fishing club had every right to use it, citing an obscure clause she'd supposedly found in the HOA's records. Ethan's protests were met with her waving a hand dismissively, insisting the matter was settled. When he refused to back down, Margaret's smile vanished and she reached for her phone, dialing the local sheriff's office to report a trespasser causing a disturbance on Ethan's own land. The sheriff arrived, a weary man named Deputy Harris who knew Ethan from years of community dealings. Harris listened to Margaret's theatrical account of Ethan's aggression, but took one look at the property line on Ethan's deed and shook his head. The lake was undeniably Ethan's, and Margaret's sign was illegal. He ordered it removed and warned her about filing false reports. Ethan watched as Tyler sulked away, his fishing rod in hand, while Margaret's face turned a shade of red that rivaled the sign's lettering. But Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Margaret wasn't the type to admit defeat. She'd double down, and he needed to be ready. That night, he pored over the HOA's charter, his secret weapon, and confirmed his budget veto power was intact. He also discovered something else. Margaret had been siphoning HOA funds for personal projects, including a lavish renovation of her own backyard. The evidence was buried in financial records, but it was there, sloppy, traceable, and damning. Ethan decided to bide his time, letting Margaret think she'd won this round. He'd play her game, but on his terms. Over the next few weeks, Margaret escalated her campaign. She rallied the HOA board, convincing them the lake should be annexed for community benefit. She organized petitions, claiming Ethan's refusal to share was selfish and harmful to property values. Flyers appeared in mailboxes, accusing Ethan of hoarding resources and threatening legal action. The community buzzed with gossip, painting Ethan as a greedy outsider. Margaret's charisma and relentless energy swayed many residents who didn't know the lake was private property or that Ethan had saved their HOA from collapse. Meanwhile, Tyler and his friends continued sneaking onto Ethan's land, leaving beer cans and fishing baits scattered by the lake. Ethan installed cameras, capturing every trespass, but held off confronting them. He was building a case, documenting every move Margaret made. Her audacity was her weakness. She was so confident in her power that she didn't notice the noose tightening around her. One evening, Ethan attended an HOA meeting, a rare appearance that drew curious glances. Margaret presided like a monarch, her agenda packed with plans to fund a community lake project that would effectively seize Ethan's property through eminent domain. She presented doctored maps, claiming the lake was partially on HOA land, and proposed a budget increase to cover legal fees. The room nodded along, swayed by her promises of fishing tournaments and family picnics. Ethan sat silently, his presence unnoticed until the budget vote. When Margaret called for approval, he stood, producing a copy of the HOA charter and calmly invoking his veto power. The room fell silent. Margaret's face froze, her pen hovering over her clipboard. Ethan explained that no budget could pass without his approval, a clause she'd never bothered to read. Whispers spread as residents realized Margaret's plan was dead in the water. She stammered, accusing Ethan of fraud, but he held up the financial records, hinting at her misuse of funds without revealing his full hand. The meeting ended in chaos, with Margaret storming out and residents questioning her leadership. Ethan had drawn first blood, but the war was far from over. Margaret's pride was wounded, and she'd come back swinging, unaware that Ethan was already planning his next move. The fallout from the HOA meeting spread like wildfire through Willow Creek Estates. Margaret's grip on the community began to slip as whispers of her financial missteps grew louder. Residents who once bowed to her authority now questioned her motives, and Ethan's unexpected power play had shifted the narrative. He wasn't just the reclusive rancher anymore. He was a wild card, a man with secrets and leverage. Margaret, however, was undeterred. Her wounded pride fueled a new strategy, one that leaned on her knack for manipulation and her belief that she could outmaneuver Ethan through sheer audacity. She didn't know the depth of his resources or the evidence he'd been quietly amassing. For Ethan, the battle was no longer just about protecting his lake. It was about dismantling Margaret's reign and teaching her a lesson in humility. Margaret's next move was bolder than anyone expected. She filed a formal complaint with the county, claiming Ethan's lake violated environmental regulations. She hired a shady consultant who produced a report alleging the lake's filtration system was polluting local groundwater. A baseless accusation, but one that carried enough weight to prompt an inspection. Ethan received a notice from the county demanding access to his property for testing. He complied, knowing his system was state-of-the-art and compliant with every regulation. The inspection found nothing, but the process cost Ethan time and legal fees, a calculated jab by Margaret to wear him down. She didn't stop there. She launched a smear campaign, posting on community forums and social media about Ethan's dangerous lake, accusing him of endangering wildlife and children. Photos of Tyler and his friends fishing, taken before Ethan's cameras caught their trespassing, were shared as proof of the lake's accessibility. Twisting the narrative to paint Ethan as the villain, Ethan, ever the strategist, didn't react publicly. Instead, he hired a private investigator to dig deeper into Margaret's finances. The investigator uncovered a trail of questionable transactions. HOA funds funneled into accounts linked to her family, including payments for Tyler's fishing club supplies and a suspiciously timed renovation of Margaret's home. The evidence was airtight, but Ethan held off exposing her. He wanted to wait for the perfect moment when her overconfidence would leave her vulnerable. Meanwhile, he fortified his property, installing higher fences and motion sensor lights around the lake. Tyler's late-night fishing trip stopped, but Margaret's allies on the HOA board began pushing for a new vote to override Ethan's veto, claiming it was an outdated clause. They didn't know Ethan had already consulted a lawyer, who confirmed the clause was ironclad. Margaret's desperation was showing, and Ethan sensed she was nearing a breaking point. One stormy afternoon, Margaret overplayed her hand. She organized a community cleanup event, leading a group of residents to Ethan's lake under the guise of removing debris. In reality, it was a stunt to assert control, with Tyler and his friends planting more signs and even attempting to install a dock. Ethan's cameras caught everything, including Margaret directing the group onto his property. He called Deputy Harris, who arrived to find Margaret arguing that the lake was public domain. Harris, armed with the previous report and Ethan's deed, shut her down, threatening citations for trespassing. The residents, embarrassed and confused, dispersed, leaving Margaret fuming. Ethan saw his opening. He sent an anonymous tip to the HOA board, attaching excerpts of the financial records and suggesting an audit. The board, already shaken by the meeting debacle, agreed, and whispers of Margaret's misconduct grew into a roar. As the audit loomed, Margaret's behavior grew erratic. She sent frantic emails to residents, claiming Ethan was sabotaging the community, but her accusations lacked evidence and only fueled suspicion. Ethan, meanwhile, prepared for the final HOA meeting of the year, where the audit results would be revealed. He had one last card to play, a proposal to dissolve the HOA entirely, a move his veto power could force if the board resisted. Margaret had no idea the trap was set, her empire crumbling under the weight of her own greed. The lake, once the spark of this feud, now stood as a symbol of Ethan's quiet resilience. The next meeting would decide everything, and Ethan was ready to end Margaret's reign once and for all. If this wild HOA saga had you hooked, don't miss the next chapters. Subscribe now, hit that like button, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment with your craziest neighbor story, and we'll see you in part 3 for more jaw-dropping drama.